All right, this is Real Talk, History as a Weapon for Black Liberation, and I'm your host, Dr. Sundiata Keita Cha-Jua. We have with us today Dr. Lagarrett King. Dr. King is an associate professor of social studies education, and he is also the founding director of the Center for K-12 Black History and Racial Literacy Education. Dr. King taught 8 years in Texas and Georgia, winning Rookie Teacher of the Year in 2001 at Willow Ridge High School in Houston, Texas, and Texas of the Year in 2006 at Cedar Grove High School. He is also the author of the he has also won a number of early career awards in critical issues of education group, the American Educational Research Association, the College and University Faculty Association for the National Council for Social Studies, an emerging scholar of the African diaspora through the Comparative and International Education Society. He has held endowed professorships and recently received the Spirit of American Award from the National Council for Social Studies. Previous winners included Rosa Parks and John Lewis. Dr. King has published the award-winning We Be Loving Black Children, Teaching Enslavement in American History, Lessons, Plans, and Primary Sources, Perspectives on the Teaching of Black Histories in Schools, Social Studies and Racial Literacy, and he has also authored 50 publications in scholarly journals such as the Journal of Negro Education. Dr. King holds a Teaching Black History conference each summer. It's now in its sixth rendition, and he has reached over 3,500 teachers who attend and have learned the best Black history educators worldwide. Welcome, Brother Lagarrett. It's a pleasure to finally get to meet you. I've admired your work for a number of years, going back to when you were at Missouri running the Carter Center. So it's been a minute, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me.
So history as a weapon for Black liberation, right? What we try and do here, we're informal, so we become brother and sister in this space as opposed to doctor, da da da, and all of that. Um, I also put an emphasis on trying to get to know the guest and get the audience to have a sense of who the guest is and their issues and concerns and how they came to be, right? How they came to be. So I want to start with some biographical questions. And essentially, what I'm trying to get at is what is the process, right, that you became the scholar of Black history and literacy and social studies? And so I want to go back to when you were a child. And can you talk about the time in which you grew up, right? Went through your formative years, your adolescence, etc., and talk about the social historical context, talk about the place, and talk about your class position.
Yeah, definitely. So my people, are from East Texas, Henderson, Texas, but I grew up in Baton Rouge and Baker, Louisiana. Baker, Louisiana is a suburb above Baton Rouge. You know, history. I've always been good at history, even as a young child, right? And I remember even sitting in elementary school, right, listening to the teacher or reading a book, and just in my mind, I said, "This doesn't make sense," right? So, being in Louisiana in the '80s and '90s, um, there, we learned that plantation owners were nice to their slaves, and that it was a family
Part of
affair.
the family.
Yeah, and I'm sitting there as an 8-year old, a 9-year old, and said, this just doesn't make sense. And while my parents weren't really political, they did have those, encyclopedias. My father, I remember, had these Black history encyclopedia books, and I would just read them every time I would visit him. And it wasn't until college that I really, really fed my soul because all through primary and secondary school, I was this just doesn't make sense, right? And I told my 11th grade history teacher that I was going to be a history teacher because we're not learning, the right stuff. But when I got to college, I went to Louisiana State University, and you may know this brother, man. I had this Black history professor, Dr. Leonard Moore, and
Of course, I know Leonard. We had a fellowship for folks in the Big Ten back
uh-huh,
in the mid '80s.
uh-huh,
Yeah, yeah.
and when I tell you that's when I fell in love with Black history, is by, first of all, like Leonard was my first Black male college professor, I believe, maybe my only Black professor at LSU. And
What was it? What about high school? Did you have black professors in high school? Black male professors?
oh, man, I had Black women, and I may have had
A lot?
one. Huh?
A
No, not
lot?
a lot at all. No. And what's interesting was that our school, we were still under the desegregation order. So we were a perfect racial mix of 51,
Mm.
49, 51 Black, 49% white. And I may have had two or three Black women teachers. The only Black male teacher I had before that, excluding PE, was
Yeah, 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 yeah.
um, algebra. Mr. Peters, yeah, yeah, he was a football coach, but a wonderful math educator. But yeah, Leonard, I took all of Leonard's courses, and when it was time for me to look for PhD programs, I didn't get to a history PhD program, but I saw that Lynn was at the University of Texas, and I said, well, if Lynn at the University of Texas, I'm going to the University of Texas for grad school.
Okay. Now, so you always felt there was something a little bit off, a story that was missing. But so talk a little bit more about experiences growing up. I mean,
Mhm.
because this isn't simply a matter of your instincts. There must be some incidents that are occurring, and yeah, just walk us through processes. Are there beyond Leonard in college? Are there books that you're reading in high school? Are there is there a mentor? What's giving you the confidence to say to a teacher in high school that I'm gonna become a history teacher because y'all not telling us the truth?
You know,
That comes from somewhere.
yeah, when I think about my childhood living in the South, right? Growing up in Louisiana, you see racism, right? And you see your history kind of play in front of you, very subtle, right? And from comments from teachers of, hey, you don't look like, an intellectual, or what type of job he says those very subtle things. And as a kid, you don't have the language.
That's right.
You're just like, ah. And then the way our town was set up, we had a, this was in the early 90s. We had a black and white homecoming queen,
You had a what?
a black and a white homecoming queen.
Okay, okay. You
We had
had
a
two
black and
distinct
white,
homecomings. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, we had a black and white SGA presidents. We were still very segregated in our small town in Baker. And black and while we were all cool at school, we did not mix
Yeah.
afterwards. After and interracial dating, oh, it was a no-no to the point where if people were, dating different people of different races, it was, people were sneaking around type of aspect.
Yeah, yeah.
So I knew something was up, right? Just based on the way in which, and again, my parents weren't political, but they would say some stuff that would have my ears perked up.
Mm.
Father would say, yeah, they don't want no black man to, do this, or they don't want a black man to do that. Those type of, and so for me, I was like, something is up around here, right? And like I said, I didn't get that language until college when I became more politically active, there at LSU, and then taking Leonard's course.
Yeah, I mean, what you described is pretty common. I want to jump to picking up a piece of your career at Missouri. Uh, you go there in 2018. You found the Carter Center for K-12 Black History Education, and I want you to talk about that. But before you go there, um, you've now moved to Buffalo, University of Buffalo, in that graduate center, and you have a. I'm assuming that the centers do similar things, right?
Yes.
That this is a more elaborate version of the Carter Center. So, what you're doing now at the K to 12 Black History and Racial Literacy Education. So, can you describe what you did with the Carter Center, what you're doing now with the K through 12, and are there similar centers focused on education, Black history within the U.S. empire?
So, um, I started grad school in 2008, and shortly after that, I started to begin to kind of read all things Black history. Right, I started to read the education literature around that. I started to read histories, around Black history, really getting to Woodson and his K-12 contributions. And what I began to realize is that we've been doing this Black history thing since the 19th century, right? And
Oh yeah.
teachers have been developing their own textbooks, even if they weren't, classically trained historians. And while we did have the association, right, for the study of African American life and history, Negro life and history back then, and please correct me if I'm wrong, um, the association is kind of looked at more within higher ed, and while they're friendly to teachers and have teacher professional development at the conference, I wanted to have a center that focused strictly on PK 12 education, right?
Okay.
Somewhere to improve Black history instruction and racial literacy in K-12 schools, because that's been an enduring concern, particularly
Mm-hmm.
since the 1960s, right? So that's just kind of the basis, of that. And what we attempt to do is, number one, provide research um, on the status of Black history education. And what I attempt to do is not necessarily focus on the negative aspects, because we can all focus on the negative, but find those exemplars of Black history instruction around the country, so we can kind of create this network and
Yeah.
create the best practices around Black history.
So
And
let me stop you for a moment and get you to open some things up. So what is the status? I've read a couple of your
Mhm.
articles in that regard. So in terms of the teaching of Black history in the public school systems in the U.S. empire, um, how central is it? What's the likelihood that the typical Black kid in a secondary classroom, in the course of say their junior sophomore year of high school, can take a course in Black history? How much time is devoted
yeah.
to teaching about us?
Yeah, so it's unlikely, based on the research, right? So what we found based on the a research study done by the National Museum of African American History and Culture, they found that many teachers are interested in teaching Black history and want to teach Black history, and some of them believe they teach Black history a lot. But when they broke down the amount of time that teachers actually taught Black history throughout the year, it was 8 to 9% of the curriculum was dedicated towards Black history education, right? When we look at national trends in terms of social studies state standards, those standards are very limited, only focusing on enslavement, um, Reconstruction, and the Civil Rights Movement, and they're disjointed in the way in which they're taught. They're only teaching a few quote unquote Black messiahs and heroes,
Hmm.
like Martin Luther King Jr., and not even teaching that right, right? Um,
Right,
so,
right.
so holistically, it's dire, right? Holistically, typically it takes a special teacher to push past the curriculum, and you do have some school systems that mandate Black history for graduation, like Philadelphia, and I believe the Cherry Hill School District in New Jersey. You have a few states that are supposed to mandate Black history in their schools, around 11 to 12. And so
These state mandates, like in Illinois,
yeah,
we've had a state mandate since the 70s, but it's a
exactly.
mandate for a module,
Okay, okay.
right? So a couple of classes in the year would
Mhm,
constitute a module. Would I be
mhm.
correct?
Yeah, so, typically, these states are very symbolic in terms of these Black history mandates, and there's no accountability. There's no set of standards a lot. And one thing, about what we can take away from these anti-history laws springing up is that you can hold school districts accountable for not doing what the law says, right? So
Mhm.
these states, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Florida, South Carolina, Tennessee, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Washington State, and California has an ethnic studies mandate, can learn a lot if they're really serious about the teaching
Mhm.
of Black history.
But
But the majority of Black history courses are electives in those particular states.
I want to come back and pick this up toward the end because we got some questions that are going to push us to this moment in DeSantis and that kind of stuff. So I want to pick that up toward the end. But yeah, we're in a dire situation. So I was going back through your stuff and I found perspectives of Black histories in
Mhm.
schools, right? And one of the first things that's attractive about that is the title. So explain that title because you got an IES here.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay, so explain what you're dealing with.
So I tell people all the time that there's multiple perspectives in history, and in many ways, we need to get rid of the "why" in history, which denotes singular. And when people denote something that's singular, they automatically default to the Eurocentric narrative. But when we look at the IES to remind people that there's histories instead of a history, then hopefully that will put them in a mind frame that, oh, wow, people experience histories differently. There's different perspectives, and people have experienced histories differently. And before we can be a historically mature society, we have to take these historical perspectives seriously.
Now I want to press some things because Henry Louis Gates he once said that there were 40 million different ways to be black. And
Mhm.
he said that at a moment in which the U.S. Census was claiming that there were 40 million black folk.
Okay.
And so, what I'm trying to get at is, are you suggesting that there are multiple histories and that it comes down to, like, how some of these people that they talk about, they got a personal truth?
Mhm.
Like, like there could be a personal truth. I mean, are you suggesting that we got personal individual histories, or do you mean something more limited here?
Yeah. Um, so no, I'm definitely, and that's a difficulty in history, period, right? Particularly when we deal with all these various different perspectives of history, even the concept of Black history and what constitutes as Black. No, but all these are scientific, approaches. What we can see in the voices of Black people, and not just some made up, stories and fallacies, but just reminding people that Black history is simply not skin color, right? Meaning that what we've done in our school system and how we have measured progress is we've measured it quantitatively, right? So we count the number of Black people in the curriculum, but we don't measure it qualitatively.
Mm.
And if we measure success by qualitative means, then that historical trajectory should change because Black history comes from Black people's perspectives, right? Their views, their experiences. And because it comes from their voices and their experiences, that can look totally different from the progressive history that we teach in traditional in schools. So people have to realize that what's important to white people, what is historically important to white people may not be historically important to Black people.
You know, I want to go a little further here since we're having a conversation.
Mhm.
Um, I got a book that I'm working on now, and the first chapter begins with Barack Obama's race speech when he was
Mm,
running for the nomination. And you know what in analyzing that speech, what comes out is that Barack Obama has a view of history that we could call the ideology of progress,
mm,
right?
mhm,
The ideology of historical progress, and it's on the basis that's the basis upon which he condemns, and because he does more than simply critique Reverend Jeremiah Wright, he condemns him and says that Reverend Jeremiah Wright does not understand that America has made progress, da 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 da. And so I go on from there to talk about, and I used I use plurals, right? Experiences, social historical experiences, histories, but I do believe that there is a what would I say, a modal experience and a modal history. That
mm,
there is a historical experience that is most reoccurring amongst the African American people,
mhm,
and that history is a history of being a working class person, right? In other words, there were 89 to 92% of all black folks were enslaved.
mhm, mhm,
Um, Probably 93, 94, 95% were agricultural workers or sharecroppers, right? That in every historical period, there is a broad based commonality so that we can talk about something that's more coherent and not as fractured. How do you think about that?
Well, first of all, that's powerful. And that form of approach could definitely be used, within schools to help us understand kind of the class dynamics of blackness, because black history many times focus on the black elite, right? Particularly black
Oh,
males who are
absolutely.
heterosexual, middle class and Christian, right? And all other identities are kind of erased a little bit from black history in our K-12 schools. Um, when I think about Barack in general, right, as a
Mm,
historical figure, right, I mean, I'm like a lot of black folk and really admire the brother, right,
right.
as a historical figure. But then when we
Nobody
get,
went to jail out of his administration. It
I
wasn't
mean,
corrupt.
I
You
mean,
know, let's
man,
be clear.
he was on point, right? And he married a black woman. I think helped him a lot with the black community. Him now the critique of Jeremiah, I think, really irritated a lot of us,
Mm.
um, because in those particular attacks, we really wanted to see the brother stand up for the other brother instead of throw him under the bus like that. But no, I think when we expand the narratives, like that, for more kind of social histories and more of a
Hmm.
class-based history, I think that really helps us. So my friend Dr. Ashley Woodson, she's a dean now at a school in Michigan, but she wrote a piece a few years ago where she asked students about civil rights history, and what she came up with is that the students, and these students were black, felt that they couldn't be change makers, that they couldn't be the citizens that they thought the people during the civil rights movement were, because they weren't educated, they weren't middle
Mm.
class, they didn't talk like those people. So it was a total disconnect
Wow.
between the students who were lower socioeconomic, right?
Right.
Who didn't have the diction, right? And who wasn't really with the respectability politics. So when we focus on the holistic aspect of Black people and Black history, I think will help our students and our kids really grow up to say, hey, yes, I can be change makers.
And, no, I think you hit on a major facet that, if you only think in the most narrow frames of race, you forget that class matters, and that an impoverished young Black kid might not believe that they can be Martin Luther King,
Exactly. Exactly.
and
Because
they sure don't believe they can be Jay-Z and Oprah.
they see the clothes, they see, the orator, even with
Yeah,
Barack, you see the orator and they just looking around and like, I don't talk like that.
right.
I don't get special treatment like that. Type of aspect, which was really a fascinating study she did.
Yeah. So another thing that I got from the perspectives on Black history is, you got this vignette that you open with about Carter G. Woodson, the
Mhm, mhm,
founder, who he institutionalized Black the study of people of the African diaspora, and the story. Can you tell it, or you want me to tell it since I just read it and it's fresh in my mind?
go ahead and tell it.
Okay, I'll tell it. So Woodson is a graduate student at Harvard, and he's got a professor, Edward Channing, very famous American history professor, who is also his dissertation
Mhm,
advisor. And Woodson raises the point in a seminar on the American Revolution that the first person to die was a Black man,
mhm,
Crispus Attucks,
mhm,
and his advisor and professor starts laughing
mhm, mhm,
and then says, quote, well, he dismisses it, and then he
mhm,
says that the possibility that, quote, Negro blood was given for liberty, he found it ludicrous,
mhm, mhm,
right? And that was 1908. I know that I went through a situation in 69 in an English class
mhm,
where the assignment was write about a great man. You know, they didn't even conceive that there could be great women. And this was a female, white female instructor.
mhm,
And so I wrote on Malcolm X. And she literally took my paper. She went to the class, to the front of the classroom, and she took my paper and she shredded it, just tore it up. And she said, he did not do the assignment. He wrote on a great, the assignment was to write on a great man, and he wrote on a thug, a hate monger, da da da
mhm.
da. And so this kind of thing, 1908, 1969, to what extent are our children still experiencing that kind of phenomena, or is it all now real subtle? Or some of
Mm.
this just still blatant, naked racism?
Some of the stuff is blatant and under the guise of ignorance.
Hmm.
Throughout the last few years, there's been news on teachers teaching slavery math problems, teaching slavery research, recess games, chastising kids for bringing in Black historical characters and history in their classrooms, right? And one of the major, what the story you told and what Woodson experienced is all based on understanding us as well, not humanizing us. And
That's
history
right.
is a humanizing agent. And when we're froze as slaves, right? And most of our because the first time a kid learned about Black history is enslavement. And when you free someone as a slave, right, that does something to the psyche.
Oh, oh yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
mean, you have Afro pessimist scholars that would say that it's one of those things that we are constantly enslaved, meaning that we don't have agency. And you
That's
see
right.
and you see the surveillance of black folk, you see the powerful domination of black folk, the always indicating that if y'all could just be like white people, your lives would be better. And that's just kind of the implications to all of these particular settings. But yeah, you do have some teachers doing harm in the classroom.
I just want to pick at that Afro pessimism. I had a student about 2 years ago run up in my class. They were taking a class with one of the Afro pessimists we
Uh-huh.
have in Black Studies, and this young woman came into class, and I can't even remember the question that I asked, but she started answering the question, and then she started talking about how black people were damned and doomed. I'm like, no, 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 no. Do you read emails that come from me to you?
Mhm.
It ends with Lasa Matuda Shinde and Bilachaka. We will win without a doubt. We're
Yeah,
not damned and doomed.
yeah.
We're fine. So those perverse theories have had a negative influence on our people. But what you mentioned, I know that you're tracking this stuff,
Mhm.
but how do we get those experiences that black kids are still having in the public school systems, right? And we're now down to what, about 6% black teachers
Mhm.
nationally? How
Yeah.
do we get those experiences on the radar of black liberation organizations, on them civil writers, and on black politicians?
So, I know a professor out at Grinnell. She had a website that tracked curriculum violence, all the news stories on curriculum violence, um, and I'll pull it up next time you have a long talk. But it situates all those news stories, and if we could send that, to the various different freedom schools, to uh,
Yeah.
African American Studies departments and independent schools, I think we can do a lot of good, because while and here's the catch 22. A lot of these teachers claim that they were trying to infuse diversity education in their classrooms, right? And that's one of the reasons why I created my center, was because on one point, I don't want to demonize a teacher for trying,
Right, right.
right? But then on the other part, I don't want my kids to be harmed,
That's right.
right? And I say our, right? My personal kids as well as
Right.
my kids, holistically, because they don't deserve that, right? And so yeah, so it's real tough, because they're saying I'm trying to do better, but because of their education and their indoctrination throughout life,
Right.
through media, through all these other aspects, they don't see us as fully human, or their perspectives are strictly based on their perspectives, not even thinking about the harm that they're doing to students.
And the funny piece of this is that I don't recall any effort on our part to deal with teacher training programs at the
Mhm.
university level. I
Yeah.
had a situation about 5 years ago where, they, as faculty, they like to rotate you on the kind of committees that they put you on so you don't
Mhm.
build up, historical memory and some power. So they put me on the undergraduate studies committee in the history department. And it was the year that the history department, along with the department in education that dealt with history and philosophy, were rewriting the social studies curriculum for getting a teaching certificate.
Okay.
And so, white woman walks in with the proposal that they've worked out. They got 31 classes, not one course to become a social studies teacher, get a certificate, dealt with African people,
Yeah.
Latinx people,
Yeah.
American
Yeah.
Indians, Asian Americans. And, I just started walking through things, with them. 46% of the students in this state are black. In 8 years, it's going to be in the 60%.
Hmm.
Da 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 da. We can't do this. The two white women who presented it went. They started crying, and they went to the next thing I know, I'm in a meeting with the damn associate dean, somebody from HR.
Hmm. Yeah.
But then all my recommendations, because the committee votes with me,
Hmm.
because they made a mistake and they put a committee that had 50% people of color. And so we actually changed the proposal.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, get this, at the end of the year, the white woman who cried
Hmm.
got an award for diversity education.
Wow.
You know, as they say, if you don't laugh, you go insane with these people.
So something that we need to do better on in terms of higher ed is so a lot of times people blame teacher education programs for the lack of racial literacy that teachers have, but really that's a university issue, right?
Yeah.
I think I read that only 20% of white students take ethnic studies courses, right? And I can think of, my students at Clemson, Missouri, and I have been to Buffalo long enough to look at their transcripts, but they'll have these history requirements and they'll just take some Chinese history and Indian history, and very rarely would I see them taking the African American studies or African history or African American history, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But that's a university problem in terms of general education. And they need to make sure that general education, that all students touch an ethnic studies specific course, before they leave that campus. And then also, I think with colleges of educations and arts and science programs, we need to work together, in terms of, so I've seen College of Education be contentious to arts and sciences. I've seen arts and sciences be contentious to College of
Hmm.
Education. And that needs to, be subdued a little bit. And then also I think, arts and sciences, particularly African American studies, can get into dual enrollment a little bit more
Yes.
with the high schools to ensure that they get that type of knowledge as well, and make sure that the professors have a connection to K-12 education too.
No, I agree with you. And that's, we're going to have to rescue African American studies because it's off the rails. All right, I want to come back and I'm going to run some statistics by
Okay.
you that I got from the Pew. And this might take a moment, but stop me if you need to. But
Okay.
I find these statistics revealing and frightening.
Okay.
So, first, most 51% of black adults said that they were, quote, extremely informed, unquote, or, quote, very informed, unquote, about African American history. So they feel like they know it, all right? Um, a plurality, 43% said they acquired everything, quote, everything, unquote, that's 14%, or, quote, most of what I know, unquote, 29% about black history informally from family and friends rather than through formal processes, i.e., a course. The survey further found, and it reinforces the need for an institution that uses black historical knowledge to culturally socialize black youth. So, this is what they found. Some 30% of African American adults identified media,
Mm.
television, movies, music, and books as their primary source for information on black history. Similarly, 27% of black adults obtained, quote, everything, unquote, or, quote, most, unquote, of their information about African American history from the web, search engines, and social media.
Yeah.
Now, not surprising, but shocking nonetheless, was that only 23% of black adults named K to 12 schools as where they learned quote everything, unquote, most, quote most, unquote most of what they know of Black history. And interestingly, 24% identified college as the font of their Black historical knowledge, and less than 31% of Black adults have a degree, yet nearly a quarter of African Americans learn Black history in college.
Yeah.
Okay, I know that's a lot to take
Yeah.
in,
Yeah.
but can you react to that?
So, something I ask the teachers we work with a lot is, when did you fall in love with Black history? Right. And I ask that question just to see where where their Black history knowledge comes from. And I tell you, I've probably asked maybe 1,000 teachers that, and very rarely do they mention schools. Now they may mention
Mm,
a teacher, like this teacher brought it out or whatever, but it is never the school. It's never the curriculum and textbooks or nothing like that. It's always something that deals with the church, some type of community event, their parents, or just like you said, the TV, during documentaries and everything like that. That is just telling us several things. Number one, um, all the stuff that they're saying in the media is manufactured. There's not good Black history teaching. There's not good racial literacy teaching in our schools, right?
right,
Um, it's just not. Our students aren't picking it up. And the importance of bringing in a new median for Black history, the internet and
mm,
social media, right? There, there are some great social media Black history teachers out there, right? Just last week I was in Cincinnati at the Underground Railroad Museum doing a talk with the audience down there, and
right, right,
sweet lady, asked me a really good question about, hey, there's a lot of good media around Black history. Which ones would you consider? And we talked about it. And I said, but you know what? Nothing ever beats a book, right? You can use that resource, but just make sure that they read the book. She said, Dr. King, these kids ain't reading no books. You know, these regular people ain't be reading no books. So the social media and everything that we have on television. So I am, real excited to see all these documentaries that are
right, right.
springing up on Netflix and Hulu and HBO and all these particular places, because they are teaching some form. But we understand that many of those things are entertainment, right?
That's right.
And but you have to start somewhere. And if
Yeah,
they're getting it from media, you know, by some really good directors, and you have some wonderful historians being consultants, then I guess we can take that, versus the school. But you and I know, Black community have always been responsible for teaching Black history to our kids.
but it seems like Woodson had once he developed Negro History Week, and Black schools and churches and civic associations took it up, right? Um, there was a more systematic development. I remember in church, AME, I got a lot of African American history.
Mm,
And it wasn't just Negro elites, right? It was a lot of nationalists, because that's the nature of the AME piece, right?
mhm.
But it seems like there's more stuff out there, but it's not having transformative value.
Mm. What do you mean by transformative value?
Meaning that Black kids are not showing up with a sense of dignity and
Mm.
purpose. They might be very, they have self efficacy themselves as an individual, but they don't see it as a national, and I prefer national to racial, meaning that I think that we are a nation within a nation, right?
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Um, they don't the things that they feel, if they have positive feelings about themselves and their family, they don't extend that to most other Black folk.
Hmm, okay. All right.
And so at some point, we got to create an educational system in the community that provides us with what's not being done in the public schools, right? As the poll shows, and what clearly isn't what's in media, and particularly social media, is you're rolling the dice.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know there's tons of organizations that are trying. Through the Teaching Black History Conference, we meet tons of different people. We have brother Khalid Alakim, who has his traveling Black History Museum.
Oh
He did,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
The brother out of Detroit, right?
yeah, Black
Yeah,
History
yeah. That's a good
101.
brother.
Yeah,
He got his degree here at Illinois.
yeah.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
did.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think he graduated a few years ago.
yeah, yeah.
Um, he's doing some wonderful things for our community. Locally in Buffalo. Oh man, I got people down there cursing me out for not getting back with them. About their Black History stuff, and I'm like, all right, I'm coming. So so there's some
No, there's a
really.
hunger amongst our people for sure.
Oh my goodness, man, dude started off an email like, "Hey, Dr. King, I hope everything fine in that ivory tower. You need to come to the community." I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, man! It's the holidays.
Oh yeah,
He's
oh
like, "I'm
yeah,
coming, man. I'm coming. I'm sorry."
yeah, yeah.
So, but yeah, there's a good number of people out there that's trying. I think, but whether or not the kids are, getting to, or maybe it's the parents, malfunction to get the kids to these particular events. It may not even be the kids,
Yeah.
maybe the parents, for all different types of reasons, right? Because oh boy, it's busy out there, right?
No, it is. It's real busy. So I want to get us into the thick of the fray,
Okay.
right? Very specific, right? So my observation, you just need to help a brother out, okay?
Okay. All right.
It seems that the clock has either been turned back on teaching Black histories,
Mhm.
or not as much improvement has been made since the 1960s. Can you explain the extensiveness of the vicious attempt to repress teaching Black histories and Black Africana Studies in K to 12 and on the college level that's being led by Ron DeSantis and Florida's governor?
So, so throughout history, right, Black history has been connected to social upheaval in society, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
whenever there has been racial strife, there's always been some type of discourse around increasing Black history in the schools. So we're looking at the lynching culture, Woodson, right? You're looking at the civil rights movement, Black history mandates and Black studies courses all in high
Mm-hmm.
schools all over. And it's
It's tied to the struggle.
right,
Absolutely. Interest
right.
is tied. Yeah. Yeah.
And our current rendition was Black Lives Matter to Floyd,
Right.
right? Between 2013 2021, I know I was called in for all types of Black history course development, right? And friends of mine called in for Black history course development, right? Um, and while building these courses up. So, as you know, whenever there's progress, there's always some type of resistance.
There
And I
was.
think we all knew some resistance was coming, but we didn't realize it was going to be this, right? In terms of systematically using the law to circumvent, which is
Yeah.
ironic with CRT, which actually looks at systemic racist laws, right?
Yeah.
Type of
Yeah.
aspect. But I'll sit that out for right now. But it what is disheartening, right? Is that we had the quote unquote racial reckoning of 2021.
Right.
Where are all those people now?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's 2023. Where are all those people now
That's
to
right.
fight against um, these laws that are restricting the humanity of Black people?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you are making it illegal, what you're saying is that you could care less about Black people's humanity or their perspectives are their way of knowing, their being, right?
Yeah.
When you say that and when you do it, right? Where are all those people to by restricting um, ideas and restricting histories? That is not what we as quote unquote American citizens are all about. But it it allows us to once again be reminded that black people don't have any friends here, and it's
That's right.
easy to attack black people politically without any harm. Because if they really wanted to do something to improve black people's lives, they would do it,
Right.
right?
Which is
But
the essence of
instead,
CRT, right?
right, instead they attack
Yeah.
instead of doing something. So it tells us, number one, that black people are easy targets politically and no one would do anything about it. Right. It tells us too that people don't respect our humanity again, and this is something we've been fighting ever since after well, ever since we landed, but after what I'm saying, emancipation. And it's really just deplorable. It really is.
Yeah. No. No. It absolutely is. Um, I want to tease out some of the things that you said. So between 2014 and 2020, your phone's ringing off the chain. So what I'm hearing is not that much before
Okay.
and not that much since.
Yeah. So there seem to be lots of funding for diversity education, and for some places, Black history education was something that they wanted to do. Right. Many different school districts or whatever. I'm not going to name different school
North,
districts.
south, east, and west. I mean, all regions.
All over, right,
Okay.
right, all over, right. Wanted to develop, either improve on their Black history courses or create Black history courses in their different school districts. After the retribution for George Floyd, right, many school districts or states pulled funding from those same places that were developing those
Ah,
curriculum, right? They pull funding even from our Teaching Black History conference, right? We in 2020 we had 1,007 teachers attend our conference from all over the country. Last year we had 350. So
dropped by a
when I
third.
when I talk to certain people, I say, hey, why the state is not going to support us going to a teaching Black history conference. So we're going to have to pay out of our own pockets, right?
Hmm.
So you saw, that between those 6 7 years, there was this growth and to really systematically include Black history in those courses. And here's the thing: the kids are screaming for it. The kids are screaming for Black history
Hmm.
courses, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of these places, they may not have like an anti-woke quote unquote law like Florida,
Right. Right.
but they're pulling funds for what they would call DEI initiatives, or they won't
So
accept those funds.
we might have some people that's not connected to university. So DEI is
Diversity, equity, and inclusion,
okay.
right? So for many different school districts, that would mean building up diverse curriculum, particularly history curriculum, hiring Black teachers to teach in their schools, hiring Black staff members, and everything like that, right? And then celebrating their kids, in school, right? So a lot of that funding has dried up. But in terms of Black history, a lot of teachers can't go to professional development now that focuses on race or Black history, and a lot of these social studies coordinators that were developing these courses can't develop them anymore because the funding got shot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now we got some questions about DEI that I'll bring up when we go to the comments. Um, so I sent you the statement from the Association for the Study of African American Life in history. And let me put it in a context that we are struggling to recenter Woodson,
Mm,
right, and his mission, right? Because Woodson had an activist mission as well, and he
hmm
had a community-based mission.
hmm
So if you think about what Woodson did early on, he created the academic conference for that 2% of black educated folk. Um, but then he turned around and created Negro History Week as a
hmm
way of distilling the knowledge with the masses and creating rituals, right?
hmm
You always saying, lift every voice and sing, and you fly the red, black, and green.
hmm
We have, over the last 7 years, convinced the Sala that we begin all public programs for a Sala flying the red, black, and green and singing the black national anthem,
hmm
right?
hmm
So it's a cultural change, and now we're beginning to take up advocacy.
Yeah.
So um, you read the statement. What's your reaction? Because we've gotten criticism
Okay.
for taking on the college board because the college board issued their statement claiming that they had made their revisions in December before DeSantis made his comments in January. Well, we all know that the right wing made their critiques of the college board's AP class, which Asala, right? This was
Yeah.
Asala recruited the scholars to do it, right?
Hmm
We know that the right wing began critiquing it in in July, and we got a September 12th article by a right winger named Stanley Kurtz in National Review, and every point that he hit is what DeSantis and the Florida Department of Education called for and in their critique. And he even said, quote, if you want to fix this course, create a module on black conservatives. And what does the College Board do? But create a module on black conservatives. So
hmm
clearly they were influenced by the right wing and they capitulated no matter what the Negroes that they tout out say. So I guess I just started talking too much. So I was going to ask you to respond to a Silas statement and put it in the context of the work that you've been doing, for the past couple of decades.
Yeah. No. 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 So, real quick, I don't think there's anything wrong with having topics around Black conservatism within kind of a Black studies or a Black history course,
Yeah,
right?
I
Um,
don't either. I
yeah.
deal with it,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I'm saying that when you capitulate
hmm
and cut out the radicals, that's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And essentially, it does the same thing that they were trying to complain the curriculum was doing in the first place, right?
Right.
Not presenting a clear picture. I think a solid statement is really strong. I think as the leader of Black history education, you all have been around over a century,
108 years. Yeah.
108 years, over a century. And I argue in my field, right? I argue in my field of social studies, they they have this it is known that social studies was created in 1916, and I have argued, I said,
Ah,
y'all are missing the history of social studies. The association is part of that history, and that happened way before
that's right.
1960. Even when we talk about the racist ways in which social studies was developed and how Woodson was fighting against
That's
those
right.
racist conceptions of social studies. So
That's right.
I say all that to say that my organization is young. Your organization is the premier organization for Black history education. And if you all don't stand up for Black history education or Black studies um, education, then who will? Right? And
Right. Right.
it's appropriate. I understand that people sometimes get worried about getting into politics, but last I checked, y'all are an independent organization.
Yeah.
right? Not
Yeah,
tied to,
yeah. We're not.
you know,
No, we ain't tied to anything.
right. So the statement was strong. The statement was full of history. And what was disappointing about the College Board? Well, one, the attack on the College Board is making the College Board look like it's some liberal business, which was never was. You know what I'm saying? So that's the most ironic thing, right? Second, I really thought I was fooled. I really thought that the College Board was doing its due diligence by asking all these people. Remember, they had all these meetings
Oh
and
yeah. Oh
they
yeah.
had all these things. They reached out to different people and and all this other stuff. And I thought they were doing their due diligence to create a dynamic African American Studies AP course, right?
See, I think what you said earlier,
Hmm.
the College Board reached out to Asala in 2019 during the upsurge.
Hmm.
Okay, and we then now I must to be honest, I was the only person on the executive council who voted against marrying the College Board,
Okay.
right? For very clear reasons, right? One, I know that only 10% of black students are in AP classes,
Hmm.
right? Two, the way Asala got $25,000.
Hmm.
The College Board, it's $300 that a high school pays to do an AP course,
Yeah.
and a student who takes an AP course pays $100 to take an exam. So, you just do the math. You figure that at a minimum, they get 500 high schools in the country to do the AP course, and they get a couple of thousand students who take it. They
Mm.
make them 1 million,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So my position was we're getting pimped.
Hmm.
The other thing is that I also thought it was suicidal. Why
Mm.
would I create an AP course where a student would take that course in high school from
Hmm.
someone who most likely has a BA and is
Hmm.
not a specialist in African American history, and then when they come to college, our Black Studies program is going to certify that, and we believe that they can do a better job
Yeah.
than someone with a PhD and a specialty in African American history. So I
Yeah.
thought it was a little kooky,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? But anyway, I was outvoted, so we jumped into it.
Hmm.
And lo and behold, as you say, that we got past 2020
Hmm.
and the moment shifted. And
Hmm.
I think that's what happened to the College Board. The
Hmm.
moment shifted and the right rose and took up this issue. And what they thought was going to be a cakewalk, they suddenly started getting the heat from the right, and I think they folded.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And they're not the only ones, right? These textbook companies
Oh yeah.
during all that time was building Black History programs. These new tech companies that were doing Black History, um,
Like,
reaching
give me
out.
a name. Give us a name.
I don't know if I want to say the names.
Okay.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
ticker. Okay. Cool.
yeah. I don't know if I want to say the names, but there was a lot of businesses
Okay.
that reached out under the guise of creating Black history because they wanted to be more racially inclusive. And then once the tides turn, they're nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
That's precisely what happened. And they saw. I mean, let's be honest. By racially inclusive, they meant they saw a new market.
Yeah, yeah,
They
exactly,
saw a new market.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So here's my last kind of question,
Hmm.
and so I think it's interesting and perhaps fortuitous that both the National Council for Black Studies (NCBS) and ASALA
Hmm.
are having their annual conferences in Florida. So NCBS conference is coming up next month in March.
Yeah.
ASALA is coming. They're going to be in Gainesville.
Hmm. Hmm.
Asala is coming to Jacksonville in September. Now there's a buzz going around about boycott the state,
Hmm.
right? And we in Asala are saying, we're paraphrasing Du Bois. You remember at the end of the war, Du Bois said, "We return fighting."
Okay. Yeah.
We're saying we coming to fight.
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
So, can you react to that? I mean, should we boycott? That would financially, NCBS and Asylum collectively is going to bring a lot of money into
Yeah.
those two Florida cities.
So my national organization, the American Education Research Association, a few years ago boycotted different states because of race for voter uh, suppression laws. And one of my colleagues made a really good point and was like, "Why are we? This is where all the black folk at. Why
Mm,
y'all? Why y'all boycotting? And we're going to San Francisco and New York City and back to Chicago and all these particular places, and we're not going to the place where these people need us. You know, there's black people in Gainesville, there's black folk in Jacksonville. Some good friends in those particular aspects, and like you all say, y'all come down to fight. It deserves a fight. And again, as the association, as our leading Black history organization, you all need to be in the fight, right? I mean, who else is
yeah,
going to do it, right? You all have the cachet, the history, the knowledge, the people, who are extremely smart and can strategize and all that stuff. And I think you all's organization can be, very useful in those places,
yeah.
including the natural Black.
I think what Woodson did, and this, I think, the only other black academic organization that I think is similar is the Black Psychologists, ABPSY, Associated Black Psychologists,
Mhm.
because they have these people who are not, they're clinicians,
Mhm.
right? They're therapists. And so they have roots in the community and they have community association. Asala has branches that are generally composed not of academics, but of ordinary people,
Mhm.
school teachers,
Yeah.
right? We got 6 branches in Florida, and it's the impetus to take the strong stand came out of those branches because they've been fighting this shit
All the
with
time.
with the scientists down on the ground,
Mhm.
man. And it's far worse than anything you've ever read in a newspaper,
Mm. Okay.
right? So we had a meeting when we were writing the statement. We included the branch presidents, and they brought folk. And so here's the kind of stories we're hearing. HBCU provost calls a meeting with the people in the arts and sciences, brings a university attorney. Provost tells them, you're going to have to change the way you teach, stick to the facts. Then turns it over to the university attorney. University attorney tells them, you will not have access to your courses on Canvas, that the management,
Mhm.
teaching management tool. You will not have access to your courses on Canvas until you sign this legal document, this statement saying that you will comply with HB7, that the law that DeSantis put through. You know what I'm saying?
At a
This is
university.
naked terrorism
At a university.
at a university.
Wow.
Look, man, this cat fired this white woman, this liberal white woman who was president of this university they called the New University in
Mhm.
Sarasota.
Mhm.
What he did was he added a bunch of right wingers onto the board of trustees. As soon as they got the majority, they fired her. And then they put out a statement saying that all courses at this university must conform to Western conceptions of liberty and the Western
At
tradition.
a university.
Hey,
Wow.
that's what universities are now the target of the right. DeSantis felt that he won the struggle with the secondary schools, So now let's go for the big boys. They intend to take black studies and mount it on a wall as a dead thing. And we need to be clear about that.
Also heard that these universities. I have a friend in Florida that says that they said that they're monitoring their emails, and if they have anything dealing with CRT, DEI, they are archiving those emails. So you know what that is. They're just
Oh,
going
I
to
know
figure
exactly.
out
Yeah,
who the ones they need to attack and try to get rid of them. That's
that's
all they're
right.
trying.
And they, DeSantis got a group of people called the woke busters that go around to schools and they, they identify the books to be banned. They harass teachers and school board members. I mean, this is straight up fascism.
And that's why I
Straight
don't
up fascism.
understand why there's not a lot of uproar, particularly with those politicians that beg us to vote for them every 2 years.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? Something got to be done. All right,
Hmm.
brother. So this is the moment where we're going to go through the chat.
Okay.
You can't see the comments, but so I'm gonna scroll through and find stuff from our participants
Okay.
and throw it at you. So give me a moment to kind of see what's there.
Okay.
Okay, a lot of it is just praise,
Okay.
but
Thank you.
people
Thank you.
really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. We enjoy your support.
People acknowledging stuff. Okay, here looks like. Boy, a lot of them disagreeing and denouncing. Um, but I know I saw some questions that they wanted some, so I just got to keep scrolling. Okay, here's the big question. Big Till asked this question, and it's about DEI.
Mhm.
And this is, I want you to react to this. Big Till says, so DEI is a way to divert funds and continue the miseducation under the guise of diversity.
Wow. um, in theory, I don't think it's supposed to be like that. It seems like that in practice.
Okay.
Um, I don't. I have a different kind of view of what DEI has, and I think a lot of persons who have taken up that administrative position don't have the amount of power they should have, or they're not doing the things that they should do, and that's largely probably under the president's or chancellor's gaze.
But in general, you're saying that Big Till is correct in terms of what ends up in practice, even though that wasn't the design.
I don't want him to be correct, but it seems like that
Yeah. Okay.
in many different places.
Yeah.
I know Dr. Greg Vinson, when he was vice president over diversity, inclusion, and community engagement at the University of Texas, did an excellent job in that particular role. And I think Leonard Moore had that role as well and did a really good job too there.
Yeah. In Texas, he finally moved up.
Hmm.
There's a lot of limitations when people move into these neo-colonial positions.
Yeah, yeah,
A lot of pressure on you.
yeah. They make a
Pay you
good
a big
salary though.
salary and hope you get hooked on that money. Right?
Yeah, they make a good salary.
All right. So, DeSantis is Trump with a brain. Yeah, just a lot of agreement. So that there was a few misguided racists who are ruining the otherwise good democracy. Okay. All right. Someone wants your contact information. Um, if you can send it to me, I'll put it in. All right. Huh. This is another DEI
Okay.
argument.
Mhm.
They say that more money is going into DEI while departments are begging for funds.
Wow. Um, yeah. You would hope that the funds going into DI can help those departments that are needing more funds to do whatever they need to do. But if those monies are being diverted to DEI and they're not doing anything, then of course that's not good for those particular programs.
Okay, so here's a question by Franny French. Anyone you know or you writing a book about this particular time in miseducation in America, focusing on Florida? So take the Florida part and then expand it. Because, I mean, this is actually your work.
Yeah, so I am writing a book. I'm trying to. I'm in the second round of revisions for my proposal for Harvard Education Press,
Okay.
and right now it's called Countering Miseducation. And I've been writing it for a little bit here. And shoot, I may have to put a chapter or two about Flawed. I think I'm writing a chapter for a colleague's book, and I'm using a lot of information I'm learning about Florida. Right.
So give us an overview.
So, in terms of countering miseducation, what I what I promote it as is the answer to Woodson's miseducation of the Negro. And what I do is I talk about the most effective ways to teach Black history
Okay.
in classrooms. I have a Black history framework that was adopted by several different school districts and states.
Hmm.
Uh, Last I checked, I don't know if they declined it now, but where I just talk about these particular principles and how different Black history narratives can be used.
Okay,
Through
but now you got to do this for us, Brother Lagarrett.
okay.
What are the principles?
All right. So
That's
y'all
what
ready?
people want to
All
know.
right. So there's 8 basic principles that I think that all Black history programs should consider, right? The first principle is teaching about power, oppression, and anti-Blackness, right? Because those particular principles still influences the material realities of Black people
Now I'm Ron DeSantis, and you just told me you're gonna teach CRT.
now. Principle two. Principle two is, of course, you can't teach all about oppression. You have to teach about Black agency, perseverance, and resistance, right? Which is our theme this year for Black history. Principle three deals with teaching about the African diaspora in Africa. Connecting the similarities and differences between
Right, right.
Blackness globally. Principle four. So all three of those principles are regular principles that any legitimate Black history program has right
We
now.
do. Yes, yes,
So
yes.
principle four deals with the concept of Black emotionality. So
Explain.
yeah, so history is about humanity, and it's about teaching us the good, the bad, the indifferent, the ugly, etc., etc. What we don't do in history is that we do not talk about Black people's emotions to particular things that are done to them. In K-12 history education, we always talk about white emotions. So when
Hmm.
you hear anything about rioting, you'll have standards that would say, particularly in Virginia, that would say white people feared slaves would revolt. White people feared that Black people would, you know what I'm saying? So you
Yeah,
always
yeah,
have these
yeah.
things, but you'll have oppressive narratives, but you never hear about the emotions that Black people
That's
experience.
right. That's right.
And if and emo so I'm talking about fear, I'm talking about sadness, I'm talking about joy,
Yeah,
right? I'm
yeah.
talking about all these emotions that make us human. We are only subjects in the standards. We're never human in the standards. Something
Mm-hmm.
is always
Mm-hmm.
done to us, and people never really understand. So when people say, "Oh, why are they rioting? They just get upset." No, Black people are always upset. We just don't show it all the time, right? And here's the history to back it up. So that's Black emotions.
Okay.
Principle 5 deals with Black identities. Like I mentioned earlier, in Black history, all we do is focus on the Black elite, right? We need to, who are Black male, Christian, middle class, educated, et cetera, et cetera. And what we need to do is focus more on all the different identities of
Yeah,
Black
yeah.
people, women, LGBTQA, the poor, et cetera, et cetera. We need to deal with all those to give us a holistic understanding of Black history. Principle 6 is the most controversial principle.
Hmm.
Principle 6, I call Black historical contention. Now,
Black historical
contention.
contention.
All right,
Okay.
now hear me out. We, as a society, we overcompensate for the lack of Black history in schools. So when we do create Black history, we make Black history too perfect and too pristine. And what we're doing when we
Yeah,
do that
yeah.
is we continuously dehumanize
That is
people
true.
because we don't show their full humanity, right? So everything has to be good, everything has to be respectable, et cetera, et cetera. But we don't deal with the ugliness of Black people's history. And
So
that
you're
gives us,
taking Du Bois.
huh?
I mean, you regurgitating Du Bois. It
Yeah,
was Du Bois who said we must deal with our experience in all of its gritty and grimy realities.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. But we do
Absolutely.
have teachers who, whenever I teach that, white teachers are like, "You're not setting me up," right? And then, and then and then Black teachers are just kind of like, "Ah, man, I don't want to, put any more psychological violence on our kids." And I'm like, "Okay, all right, I understand that." But that has come to be the most controversial principle. Um, Principle 7 is teaching about social histories. So teaching from the bottom up instead of the top down.
Hmm.
I personally believe that you learn more history by teaching about regular people. So
Absolutely.
yes, it's
Absolutely.
fine to teach about King and the Montgomery boycott, but Montgomery boycott lasted a year. So
Yeah.
what did those people do during that year?
That's right.
You know,
And
for
King didn't start it.
right, exactly, right. So teach about regular. Now, principle 8 is talking about is teaching about Black futures. All right, so hear me out on this. So people would think that Black futures is just science fiction, right? And that's fair, right? So you could use a science fiction because
Hmm.
sometimes they use history to kind of talk about notions of the future, and that's fine. Because when we think about Afrofuturism, all Afrofuturism is how would Black society look if white people just leave us the hell alone?
Right. Right.
Without colonization, without all these laws, redlining, et cetera, right? But what I'm thinking about really is using Black historical knowledge to improve society in the present and improve society in the future.
Right. Right.
Essentially, what I'm saying is giving students the permission to dream of an
Yeah.
equitable society.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the reason why this is important is because we don't teach a curriculum, or we shouldn't teach a curriculum. We're teaching citizens.
Yeah.
So we need to figure out what is the knowledge that these students need so they can be decision makers in the future. So we're giving them a permission to dream. So when they get to those positions of decision making, they've already done the work. Now all they
Hmm.
have to do is implement it. Because everyone has a dream. All our great inventions started off with a dream,
That's right.
and they just had to implement it. But the worst thing that we can do to our students is when they ask us, well, why is it the way it is? And we just say, because it is.
That's right.
We don't give them permission to dream.
That's
So
right.
those are the 8 principles.
No, no. Those are wonderful, man. And so I got to wait till the book comes out.
You know what? I have a few writings on that. I'll send them to you, but I need to go ahead and get on it. So after Black History Month, I'm really gonna focus.
Yeah, good, good. No, because you're absolutely right. I mean, look, I always took it as my principle that what I was teaching is that everything that has ever been done was one possibility, that things could have gone another way, and that we always have to understand that what people do, other people in another moment can undo and go a different way. That we have to teach history as open possibilities
Mhm,
as opposed to that foolishness. Remember that notion, the end of history?
mhm,
Capitalism is the end of history?
mhm,
No, no, this stuff is over. All right, I got another question for you. We got
mhm.
4 minutes. What points do you think grassroots organizations who are concerned with education organizing should be talking about?
You know what? First, go to your school board meetings, and when you think about all those policies, we could flip those policies for our benefit. Most of those policies are saying that certain things don't need to be taught or certain things need to be taught. You can make the argument that Black kids are suffering because we're not teaching Black history.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You can flip that argument. So while they're going to school board meetings, we need to go to school board meetings. If they have a library textbook committee, we need
We
to be on
need,
the
that's
library
right.
textbook committees, right? So I think like getting in there and really making a point that hey, we are not being represented equitable because the law says there should be no race. That's look at our curriculum.
That's
We
right.
don't have any Black history in it, and my kids want Black history. So, are you really meaning that, or are you trying to exclude Black people? And you put it back on them. Get a really good lawyer to work with
Hmm.
y'all, and I swear that stuff would change.
But everything that you just said is what the asylum branches in Florida are doing.
Hmm.
They've got their own committees dealing with the books in the library. They're they've started two freedom schools. Two of our branches have started
Hmm.
freedom schools where they're teaching the history that we believe our children should get,
Hmm.
and that's definitely the way we got to go. So what I was concerned about when we decided to join on this AP thing, that was a straight move to the talented 10th and
Hmm.
forgetting about the masses. And it
Hmm.
was also, while we need it in the public schools, I'm not arguing that,
Hmm.
but we've got to have it in the communities.
Hmm.
It's got to
Yeah.
be part of every civic organization that we have, all Black liberation organizations. That's where we make the change.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Even in the bougie ones, Jack and Jill. My wife
Oh, absolutely, there,
does
absolutely.
Black history all the time at Jack and Jill, where my daughter keep on saying, "Why we always learning Black history?"
Look, there are moments where the black bourgeoisie has a nationalistic sense, right? They might go awry, but they experience some things too. So look, brother, we got 2 minutes. Any last summatory statement you want to make?
Yeah. So, look,
1 minute.
so the Center for K-12 Black History Education has a lot of educational programming. On Saturdays, we have Black History Nerds, where we just sit for an hour and learn about Black history. And then also our Teaching Black History Conference. We really need your support for that. So if you all can come to Buffalo, New York, or even donate to the Teaching Black History Conference. This year's theme is Sounds of Blackness, Hip Hop Turns 50. And so we're looking
Hmm.
forward to having a lot of people join us in Buffalo, New York.
If you send me that information, then for my next show, I'll put it into the chat so people can get it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, brother, they loving you.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you for your support. You know what? It means a lot when our people support us. But I can't
Absolutely.
any award or anything like that. It doesn't matter as long as my people support me.
Okay. Thank you. Time for me to end the show, so I'm gonna take you out.